Hi, Dan.
Hi, Moon. Yes.
Hi. Yeah, no, thanks for joining us. And I think we'll start off the session. But I think just before we start, I think I'll just briefly introduce myself. My name is Munya. I'm an international innovator with ISAC, and I'm super excited to be speaking with another international innovator, Dan Freeman. And we're going to be doing this kind of innovators story, which is something that the CYTO Innovators Committee does, where we basically speak to people who are innovators, co-founders, and just try to get an understanding of this story, what they were up to, and really open it up also to people in the audience to also get a chance to ask them about what they're building. So yeah, without further ado, Dan, do you mind just quickly introducing yourself?
Yeah, of course. So I'm Dan Freeman. I'm the CEO and founder of terraFlow, which I'm sure we'll talk about. And I'm also co-founding this company with Ariel Ginsberg and Prateep Chattopadhyay.
Great. No, that's great. And yeah, so I think we'll probably just kind of just jump right into it. I think it's always good to kind of get an idea of who you're speaking to. And I don't know if you just want to kind of give us a brief history of Dan, where you're from, what you studied, and kind of what led you kind of to where you're at now.
Yeah, sure. So I guess really where this started is so I did college at Clemson University in South Carolina. And when I was there, I was on a very strict pre-med track. So, by senior year, I'd taken the prereqs, I'd taken the MCAT, I had written the essays. I was literally waiting for interviews. And then two things happened. One is that I started teaching myself how to code and became drawn to the AI ML world. And then the other thing that happened is that sorry, one moment. Sorry about this. Sorry about that, Mooney. So,
Not,
anyways,
not, not a problem.
I started teaching myself how to code and became drawn to the AI ML world. And then the other thing that happened is that I sort of fell into this group of makers around campus. So these are people that were doing the hackathon, the maker space, that were you know people were doing the student radio station, and it just being in that environment made me kind of think more about kind of made me want to get out and build my own path a little bit. And so at the very last semester of school, I actually ended up withdrawing my application to medical school and joining the Precision Immunology Center at NYU Medical School instead. And when I got there, I met my mentor, Prateep Chattopadhyay, and together we started this company and sort of did the work that launched me into the flow cytometry research world.
Great. No, thanks. Yeah, no, that must have been pretty tough. And I think it might be interesting, maybe know kind of that jump between kind of going from Clement to NYU. Was that just kind of sheer luck, or had you kind of did you kind of have to identify someone who you're gonna follow this passion with? And did you already have an idea that it was gonna be flow cytometry?
Yeah. So, being in this rural college town in South Carolina, I was like, the summers were kind of my chance to get out and to experience something different. And so the summer after freshman year, I didn't get any of the internships that I applied for. But I was so determined to do something different that I actually ended up I was living at an MIT frat house in Boston and doing working as a bike courier during the night. So this was like before DoorDash, Uber Eats, and all of that. It was like a new startup, and I was just biking up and down Boston until 3, 4 in the morning, running random errands. And during the day, I was doing EMT training at Boston Medical Center. So that was sort of my first experience. And then the next summer, I wrote about that experience. I got my first real research gig at Harvard Medical School. And then the summer after that, I did a research internship at NYU Medical School. And that's where I met Prateep. At the time, I had no idea. I didn't know anything about flow cytometry, but I just thought, his website, he seemed kind of entrepreneurial. He seemed kind of different than other professors I interacted with. And that's sort of what drew me to that lab in the first place.
Right. Okay. No, that sounds very cool. And I think just I guess finding those people who kind of draw you as a very key thing. And I think for me, I think one of the reasons that I'm kind of really excited about being able to host this thing is to be able to talk to people who are exciting and doing very interesting things. And I think that kind of vibes rubs off on you. And I think I'm hoping that as I have many more of these conversations with founders, again, I'll also be able to build my own thing. And maybe what we'll then do now is maybe just chat a little bit more about kind of, I guess terraFlow. Just give us an idea of what it is, where the idea came from. Yeah.
Yeah, so basically, when I got to NYU, so Prateep had just founded the Precision Immunology Core at the medical school, and I was the technician in charge of analyzing these big high parameter data sets for our collaborators. So we basically gotten the lab to the point where we could, you know, process many 96 well plates in a single day, like hundreds of patient samples in a single day. But where we were getting stuck was in the analysis, because we didn't want to do all of the analysis for our collaborators, because we didn't know the experiment as well as they did. And frankly, we just didn't have the manpower. But we also didn't want to just give them the FCS files and tell them to figure it out. Then we wanted to create some kind of middle ground where we could inject data from the instrument, get some kind of first pass, like an idea of what you can learn from this experiment, and then give that to the collaborator, sort of a complete, called it like a blood to biomarker discovery package. And that became the genesis of terraFlow. And so in order to build this, the reason that flow cytometry, it's sort of built around these two challenges around flow cytometry. One is that you have to gate things, and gating is very time consuming when you're going sample by sample, phenotype by phenotype. And the second thing is that you have to know what to gate in your data. So, if it's a small targeted panel, you're just measuring T cells or B cells, that's pretty easy. I mean, you can do that. But if you have a Bigfoot or Aurora, if you're doing spectral, if you're doing non-lineage markers, there are a lot of, there's an opportunity to discover really interesting rare subtypes inside of your cytometry data sets, but it takes a lot of expertise to know what you're looking for in that data set. And so what we built at terraFlow is a very unique approach, because what you do is you upload your FCS files and you say, okay, this is group 1, this is group 2, like find me the differences between them. What we do is we take every paper that's ever been published on flow cytometry, we extract all the rare subpopulations that have been reported in these studies, and we replicate as much as we can inside of your own data. So we actually, for each finding, we give you the gating path, we give you the statistics based on your own data set, and we actually give you like highlighted sentences where people have independently reported the same finding in their studies. And so the idea is that it sort of generates this HTML report that you can give to a collaborator, and no matter what their background or what their level of expertise with ML or cytometry is, they can pick it up and instantly understand, because it's basically a preprint about their own data. And so we've had really successful pilots now at the Cleveland Clinic and Memorial Sloan Kettering. Now we're moving into industry and scaling up that model based on those early learnings.
No, that sounds great. And I think kind of finding your own solution to kind of your own problem, I think is really an intriguing approach to building something. And I think that's an approach that I also find where you think, oh, this problem is mine, and by solving it, you actually end up solving it for many people. So I think it's really a theme that I've heard a number of founders having.
Yeah, and I mean that's really what the path ended up for me, because when we talked about this a little bit before, but when I was still that undergrad in South Carolina, I was very drawn to the startup world. Very kind of enamored of what was happening in tech. But at the time, I didn't know anyone that had started a company or worked for a startup or worked for a VC. That entire world was totally foreign to me. And so it was sort of when I kind of got out of that bubble and started like kind of aligning myself with mentors that I thought were doing something interesting, that's when, all of these different paths started opening up to me. I was like, oh, I see this as a problem people have, and I think I can do it better. And then that relationship and that pain point is what became the origin of terraFlow.
Mm, that's good. And I think you mentioned kind of getting in, kind of starting now branching out into industry. And one of the a question that I had a few weeks ago with someone was discussing this tension between collaboration and competition. And I can imagine that they may come up a point, and maybe you may have some stories here to discuss this, where having that balance. I think as an innovator, a lot of the things that we do require collaboration, and I think collaboration is key. But we're also in a space where there's a fair amount of competition, and trying to balance that out, I think is very important. I just wonder if you've had any encounters like that, and if you just want to share some insights.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I think there are a lot of companies that on their face seem like they're doing something really similar, but when you really get to know each other, you realize that you're targeting not quite the same problem, not quite the same customer segment, and that there's actually more opportunities to work together than to work against each other. And this is a big thing in terraFlow because what we're doing is it's sort of a discovery assistant. It's a non-continuous innovation. So if I went to say like, oh, I can do, it's like a flow drill, but it's 10 times faster, or 10 times cheaper, or 10 times whatever, that's a very easy sell. But what we're doing is really trying, in a way, it's a separate product category. And that takes a lot of one-on-one interactions with people to really understand the work they're doing and how terraFlow is going to fit into that, to help them understand how terraFlow is going to fit into that. So for us, we are working with many other startups and many other big corporations, and we welcome those relationships because they've served us really well in the past.
Okay, well, that's good. And I think that's what I think many people would appreciate, that collaboration does tend to be kind of the best approach. And I'd not really kind of thought about that issue of kind of going deep down and actually realizing that on the face value it might look like you're doing the same thing, but just taking a little bit of effort to actually dig a little bit deeper, you actually realize actually there's much more opportunities for collaboration than not. Cool. No, thanks. And I guess I think one of the interesting things, I think, as we're kind of setting this up, I think was this pitch competition that the HBC Harvard Business School had, which I found very, very fascinating. And I think maybe at some point we'll probably drop a link to it, which you participated in. And
Yeah.
I really found the first kind of 15 minutes of the talk. I think there was a professor, Raz Sachu. I think he really gave a very, I think, nice overview of the founder's journey. And I don't know if that kind of is something that you relate with.
Yeah. So, well, I'll just give some background on this event in case people didn't see it. So basically, what it was a Shark Tank event where I got to pitch Kevin O'Leary at Harvard Business School in front of like 4,000 people. And the way it was working, it was basically a sudden death event. So there's 8 founders that are picked from all the Harvard schools, and each founder gets 90 seconds to pitch Kevin, and then he immediately eliminates half of them. And then the remaining 4 get 3 minutes of Q&A, and then he immediately eliminates half and keeps going until there's only one person left. So it's basically like engineered to induce maximum stress. You have to really like land as many punches as you can in with the few seconds allotted to you. And we ended up going all the way to the final round and potentially getting funded as a result of this competition. So very good outcome for us. The founder journey part, you'll have to remember, I was sitting in the front row, but I was so nervous that I completely blacked out for Rez's presentation. So maybe you'll remind me what it was about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think one of the key things that I think he brought out was the journey as a founder really is kind of this like a hero's journey, where you have this calling, and you ask, can I, should I do this, can I do this, and being able to kind of go over those kind of initial challenges is really kind of how he framed the founder's journey. And I find that it does seem to follow that, where a lot of people may have great ideas, and I think the first hurdle they kind of stumble upon, just saying, I have this great idea, and wanting to pursue it, and they actually don't pursue it. So I really found that those first kind of 15 minutes where he was kind of just chatting a little bit about that, talking about the downside is probably not as bad as you think, and the upside is much higher than you expect. And I think as innovators, I think sometimes just being able to have that in our back pocket, and remember that is really key.
Yeah, I totally resonate with that. It's actually interesting because at my company, we talk a lot about the hero's journey as well. But in our framework, the hero is the cytometrist, because they source these samples, they design these experiments, they put all this work into it, and we're kind of like the sidekick that comes in and helps them get the magic elixir at the end of the journey. But I think closer to the point that Reza was making, it is easier to build a startup now than it ever has been in the past. I mean, between like ChatGPT and Fiverr, like you can really like create a startup and even get your first few paying users without taking any capital. Like you can just literally start building it on your MacBook or whatever computer you have. And so I think I think where I've seen this be successful is where there's a lot of people say like first you have to go, like you have to have the business training and the background, and you need the technical co-founder and the business co-founder. But I think what really works is you just start building, and you just need to start talking to people, and over time you're a lot of failure at first, but you're going to learn from you, keep evolving, and to get something you can actually sell to people. And you don't need a lot to get started. I mean, along the way, if you want to take extra classes or whatever, that's fine. But you don't need that as a starting point. You really don't need much of anything to begin with, except for like a deep understanding of the human problem that you're trying to solve. That's really the key element.
Yeah, well, thanks. And I think maybe just kind of that deep understanding. I think kind of watching you on that Shark Tank, I guess not show, but
Pitch.
I don't know what to call it. Yeah, pitch. I think being able to tell your idea in a way that lands to different audience, I think that was very key. And I think as innovators, sometimes we have this highly complicated I don't know workflow that you want to discuss, and being able to really break it down, I think is pretty crucial. Is this something that you've kind of had to learn as you're trying to describe what terraFlow is? And yeah.
It's definitely something I've gotten better at. I'm ashamed to say that in the Shark Tank pitch, I don't think I actually even got to say the word flow cytometry once, because I literally had 30 seconds to convey the idea. And so I just said, like, we're accelerating drug R&D. We're getting drugs to market faster. Really, which is, many layers of abstraction, over what a flow cytometrist actually does day to day. And so that is something I've had to learn. And it applies when you're talking to customers as well, because when you're talking to customers, they don't want to know that you have like this algorithm or this AI. They want to know is like, how are you going to make my life easier? And I think that was also a major learning point, that it's not necessarily like, it's not always about delivering the most value for the company. It's more like the person you're talking to, like on the Zoom. How are you going to make their life a little bit easier? And if you can make their life a little bit easier, that gets you that first wedge into this, this pharma, and then you can start building the use cases. You can find other applications. You can work off of that. But the minimum requirement is that you have to make someone's life a little bit easier. So that was also a major like a perspective shift that I had over the course of building this company.
Cool. And I think maybe we can just kind of circle back to a point that you made. I think with cytometry now, we're able to measure dozens of markers at once. And I think I like the idea that you kind of go through this history and the literature to identify cell subsets. But what are your thoughts about identifying maybe what looks like unique subsets, but it's just because you've thrown every single antibody you could find in your fridge, and now you call this a subset. How does terraFlow handle this, and do you have any particular kind of thoughts about this?
Yes, I do have thoughts about this. So one way we handle this is we look at all the disease-associated cell types in your study, and we look at all the disease-associated cell types published in the literature. We've now analyzed almost 1 million flow cytometry papers, and we look at the overlap between them. And the idea is that that overlap can provide some level of orthogonal validation, because someone has already reported this in a similar finding that pops up again in your own study. That can give you some level of confidence that this is a real result. And it's actually how we structure the report. So the report is it's a downloadable file with multiple chapters. It's like chapter 1, single markers, chapter 2, common cell types, chapter 3, rare cell types. And then the last chapter, we just do an unbiased search and show you all the unpublished all the findings that we weren't able to match the literature and might represent novel findings. And so you can take that report and you can sort of decide how deep you want to go depending on the scope of your analysis and your confidence in this data set. But it's sort of saying let's start with the obvious stuff that people are already familiar with, and then let's go deeper and deeper in steps. And so the cytometrists can decide at the end of the day what they want to take away as their final conclusion.
Cool. Well, that sounds great. And I think maybe at the end of this session, if anyone in the audience has any kind of questions kind of to highlight how terraFlow can maybe make their lives a lot easier, I think it'll be great for some chats like that. You did mention kind of a co-founder in this company, and I think that's something that again seems to be very critical. What were some of the, I guess, your thought process in identifying a co-founder and finding someone who can help you build this company?
Yes. So originally it was Pradeep and I. So, and you guys don't know, Pradeep Chattopadhyay is a big name in flow cytometry. He's gives keynotes at many CYTO conferences. He's a guest editor on cytometry, a very recognized name. And so he was the one that sort of first turned me on to this problem, and also sort of helped shape the technology and also provide those early relationships that were those relationships that were so key in getting us these first success stories. So then later, we brought in a third co-founder, Ariel Ginsberg. It's actually here. She's here in the audience. So Ariel comes, again, from a third background. So I'm from the AI/ML world. Pradeep is deep from the CYTO research world. So Ariel comes to us from the sales world. So this is actually someone that was formerly doing $13 million a year in annual sales for Thermo Fisher before she left to do the startup world instead. And so the three of us come from very different backgrounds, but we're both deeply invested in the flow cytometry community. And that's kind of the DNA that binds us together as a company.
Well, that sounds great. And I think I guess those networks are really key to kind of getting kind of the best of the best in terms of the different functions that a startup needs. And I think I've heard many people talk about you really want to get the best people in, even though you're a small company, be able to at least attract some of those high impact players. And what kind of incentives or how does one attract such
Yes.
top talent if you don't have obviously you don't have money, and you know you hope that people are passionate, but is it just passion alone that kind of drives people to joining a startup like terraFlow?
Yeah, so at the beginning, it was definitely equity more than money for sure. For sure. And it was also a um, uh, our relationship because Steve and Ariel had known each other long before we built this company together and had kind of been they kind of been following each other's career for a while before I'd even met Prateep and started this company. And so I think that kind of early relationship was very key. And I think another piece of it was just having trust in each other because when Ariel came into the company, Prateep and I had already been building TerraFlow for a year or two at that point. We'd already had some funding, but we still decided to bring Ariel in at a co-founder level because we recognized that she had a certain background and connections and just perspective that frankly Prateep and I didn't have and that we felt that we were lacking. And so we brought her in at the co-founder level because we really wanted the three of us together to be the face of this company. And I think that was a very, actually ended up being very consequential to the overall culture of this company. Because when people think about TerraFlow, I want them to think me, Prateep, and Ariel. That's been very key from the beginning.
Well, that sounds great, and I think I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about the paper that you just recently published on classical Hodgkin's lymphoma, just briefly to kind of give us an idea of kind of the power of teraflow.
Yeah. So basically what we have been doing as we do a lot of demos as part of TerraFlow, one thing we do is we say, okay, give us a data set that you have already analyzed using whatever method that you're using, and let us show you everything that you're missing using TerraFlow. And so in the demo, we actually put it side by side where we have the person's original analysis, and then right next to it, we have the TerraFlow analysis that we generated in 24 hours. And be like, look, here are all the findings that you discovered replicated here in our analysis. And here are all the other things that you missed in your own data set. And here's the statistics and the gating path in the literature that explains why it's important. And in some cases, we've actually if it's a public data set, we were actually able to discover so much that it's led to a new publication on the same data set. And so that's what we did with the Hodgkin's lymphoma data set. So this was a data set that had already been analyzed using machine learning, using traditional clustering approaches, as well as expert analysis. We were able to discover all of these new interesting populations linked to Hodgkin's disease, and we ended up getting that publication in Cell Reports. So, that was one that we did for kind of as a proof of concept, but we end up doing these almost every week in our one-on-one calls with new users.
Great, no thanks. And I think we'll probably be kind of wrapping up pretty soon. But I think the one thing that I think kind of as we've been following your journey is kind of identifying this need for or this want to be to build something, to be a maker. And is this something that maybe you think you might have innately had it? I think you recently put up a post where you and your sister were kind of talking a little bit about your companies, and it seems very interesting that two siblings. Is this something that's genetic, or is this something that you think has been nurtured?
Yeah, well, I think a big part of it is that so I joke that like founding like a biotech company would make you the family overachiever, but actually it's my sister with her 3D printing startup. And she's actually just featured in an Apple commercial for the new MacBook Pro. So I think where it comes from is that my sister and I are both Russian Israeli immigrants. So our parents literally come from a time and place in the world where private ownership was a crime, punishable by death. And so we later came to Israel, where my dad did the extraordinary work on the pacemaker that earned us the invitation to come to the United States. And so when I, talking to Kevin, I joked that for my sister and I growing up, uh, living in America is our parents brought us up with the understanding that living in America was not only a gift, but it was an investment that they expected to make a return on. And so I think my sister and I both have grown up with this understanding that we have this enormous opportunity in front of us, and we want to do something really, really great with what we've been given. And so I think even though we've taken two very different paths and are building two very different companies, I think that fire is actually comes from a very from the same source, which is this extraordinary sense of pride and of responsibility with the opportunity that led us here.
Great. No, no, thanks for that. And I think maybe just kind of in terms of wrapping up, I don't know, in terms of if people want to get in touch with you to, do some demos, obviously, we'll probably put the terraFlow link below this video. But are they, certain data sets that just seem to work well? Does the data need to be compensated prior to you getting the FCS file? Like, what are the kind of the logistics there?
Yeah, so if you want to get in touch with me, it's dan@terraflow.app, or you can just go to our website, terraflow.app, or just Google terraFlow. They all lead back to me and Ariel. You will find us. And basically, usually the first call is just like a 15-minute like intro that sort of helps us learn about your use case a little bit better. But generally what we do is we say, like, do you have a data set that you've analyzed already, maybe from a previous publication, or maybe that you haven't analyzed and just sort of been on the back burner for a while? Let us take it and put it through the pipeline. And then what we do is we generate the report and we sit down with you again and sort of take your result by result. Here are all the things we discovered using terraflow. How does align with the analysis that you did or that you would have done? And it's very little, it's a pilot basis, so you don't have to pay anything. It's a very easy entry point, because what we have found is that you can spend all day talking about the platform, but it doesn't really click until someone sees it on their own data set. And so we've made it as easy as possible to get to that point, and hopefully in doing so we can provide something of value to you as well. And so we love doing demos. It's like our number one, it's our number one thing right now. So please reach out if you have FCS data, or you might have FCS data and you want to chat about it. We'd be happy to tell you more.
Great. No, thanks a lot. And I think with that, we'll probably then call it a day. Thank you again, Dan, for spending some time with us and allowing me to have a conversation with you. And I hope you have a wonderful end of year holiday.
Great. Thank you, Munya.
Great. All right. Have a good one. Bye.